Hello, my name is Ryan Oates. This video is part of a series on the upcoming Lowell City Council election. Today, we've got District 4 Lowell City Councilor Wayne Jenness. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you are the current City Councilor for District 4.
Yep.
Could you describe what the makeup of that district?
Sure.
Where is the district?
So District 4 is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting laid out districts in the city. We've got 8 of them. District 4, I think, kind of got the leftover pieces from all the other districts. If you look at a map, it's really in the middle of the city. So it encompasses downtown, about half of the back central neighborhood. And then there's a little strip that goes all the way up to Drake it from downtown. So it includes a little slice of the acre, basically Father Morissette north. And then there's a tiny chunk of Centerville, basically up along Lakeview Ave. And then there's a tiny chunk of Pawtucketville, basically what's east of University Ave, with some cutouts here and there just for the rounding errors. So I don't know if people know, but the reason it's kind of weird is when the 8 districts were created, they were required to be within 0.5% of population to comply with the Voting Rights Act, basically. One person, one vote kind of idea to make them all equally sized. So when you draw a circle around 1/8 of the city in Centerville, and then you draw another circle around 1/8 of the city in Pawtucketville, you're left with a slice in the middle that had to go somewhere. Well, the way the math worked out, there was always going to be one district that had to cross the river, at least one. We could have done it with more than one, but that didn't make any sense. So it's one district that crosses the river, and that's District 4. So I kind of say that I feel like I have a mini at-large district. It's a lot of the city council districts, really one neighborhood, maybe 2. For District 4, it's really 4 or 5 different parts of the neighborhood. Different neighborhoods that make up part of the district. So I spend a lot of time going to various neighborhood meetings, whether it's downtown, back central, Pawtucketville, Centerville. I've been to a couple acre meetings, just to try to understand what's going on in the different corners of the district, because it is pretty diverse, and what might be affecting people in back central is very different than what's affecting people in Pawtucketville, for example. So it's a lot of work to stay on top of it all.
Yeah. That gives a picture of the district. There is a challenger, Sean McDonough, who I had on for an interview about a month ago. We'll get to him in a second. First, though, I wanted to ask, for folks who are not familiar, what is the Wayne Jenness backstory? Why did you originally decide to run for council, and why are you running again?
Sure. So to rewind a little further, I think it's always interesting to talk to people how they ended up in Lowell in the first place. Lowell, as we know, is an immigrant city, both international, but there's also local people who relocate there, and that's me. I grew up on the South Shore, a small town called Whitman, which is just east of Brockton. It's about 16,000 people. It's a little place. When I got my first quote-unquote adult job, I was working at a tech company in Woburn. So I was watching my life disappear behind the dashboard of a car as I drove back and forth every day. And I just decided I couldn't handle that anymore, and that was 2005. So I started looking around trying to figure out where would be a good spot for me. As a fairly young person on a fairly young person's salary at that point, I couldn't touch anything 128 that was close to work, so I started looking a bit further afield. Ended up in Lowell for a few different reasons, but lived on Bolton Street in South Lowell. Me and a couple roommates. We had a couple good years there. Then I moved out to Chelmsford for a year or so. And then at the end of 2009, after the economy had kind of exploded, a great deal on an apartment at the Boot Mills. So I moved into the Boot Mills, and it was really the first time I'd ever lived anywhere that I would ever consider urban. Even when I was in South Lowell, it didn't have the same kind of feel as living downtown, and I fell in love pretty quick, and I was like, I'm not going to go anywhere. So a couple years later, met my wife at a Spinners game, and we moved in together at the Boot Mills. Then we got married at Whistler Park. We've got some great pictures in our wedding attire from our season ticket seats at Lowell, which was pretty fun. And then we bought our place on Market Street in March of 2015. So we've been there over 10 years now. It's me, my wife, our dog Lucy, and our 3 cats. And I just love the city. When we implemented the new election system, I was excited to see what that meant for candidates, who was going to come out and run for city council. There was nobody in the footprint of District 4 that was an elected representative on the council, on the school committee, on the Greater Lowell Tech School Committee, in the State House, none of that. So it was this interesting kind of vacuum, and I was really trying to figure out who was going to step up and represent our neighborhood. I was excited to be involved in campaign and, help somebody get over the finish line there. I started trying to recruit friends, neighbors, people who I thought would make a good candidate. But for one reason or another, they all turned me down. Whether it was, I'm starting a family, or I'm moving soon, I'm too busy to handle it, whatever it was, I eventually ran out of people to ask. And I was like, well, I've had all these discussions. I've been really involved. Maybe it's my turn. Maybe I should just throw my hat in the ring and see how it goes. So I had some conversations and people were like, yeah, we think you'd be able to do a good job. You'd be a good candidate. I was like, all right, fine. Let's do it. Let's see how it goes. So tossed my hat in the ring and got out there and started knocking doors, talking to people. Really enjoyed that aspect of it, and then was lucky enough to win my first election in 2021. So I've been on the council for 4 years now. I really enjoy doing the work. I feel like I've built good relationships with my colleagues on the council, as well as the administration and the various neighborhood groups that make up the district in the city. So it's something that I found rewarding. I've really enjoyed giving back to the city in this way. And so I'm hoping to do it for another couple of years.
So given your backstory and the work you've been doing, what have been your priorities so far, and what would your priorities be moving forward?
Sure. So some things that I've tried to focus on during my 4 years on the council have been economic development, maintenance of city stuff, whether that's infrastructure, buildings. There was a lot of deferred maintenance in the city. And we've been able to make some good headway on that, but there's still more to do. So that's something that I'm really cognizant of. I didn't discuss my day job earlier in the intro. I was getting a little long-winded, but I'm an IT professional by trade. I work for a software company. I've worked for healthcare organizations. I've worked for nonprofits. I've worked for educational companies, all kinds of different stuff. But I was kind of in a good place when the city had the cyber incident in April of 2022, I think that was. And all my colleagues kind of looked at me and was like, well, what does this mean, Wayne? What are we doing here? What do we need to do? And I felt like I was in a good spot then to have good conversations with both the city side IT, working with the chief information officer and kind of trying to translate what he was telling me in tech speak, because we can just talk like IT people do, into things that my colleagues could understand, and be able to help us all work through the process and get to a point where we've been able to get now where we've made the investments that needed to happen in our infrastructure technologically. We're in a much better state there. So that was something we've been able to do. We've made some significant improvements in our zoning code. Example is downtown. We passed an amendment to the zoning ordinance by which any housing developments in the downtown zone of 10 units or less do not need to provide on off-street parking. That was something that was always required as part of the code, but if somebody was doing a project, they really, would just go to the land use boards and say, hey, we're just going to use the parking garages that the city owns. Is that cool? And they would get approved every time. So it was just something that was adding delays and costs to the development of housing downtown. So we were able to take that off the books, and really open things up and move things along there quicker. We've done a lot of open space improvements around the city. We were able to leverage the ARPA funds to do a lot of that. And yeah, the list goes on from there, but I don't want to, turn a 5-minute discussion into an hour and a half. But going forward, I want to maintain our focus on kind of the infrastructure of the city and improving things, whether that's sidewalks and roads or bike infrastructure, our school buildings, our municipal buildings. There's a lot of work still to be done there. We got to focus on economic development. We've had some success. One story I like to tell is if you walk up Market Street now and just think about what it looked like 5 years ago, we've been able to fill in basically all the empty storefronts that existed on Market Street. We've been able to help property owners upgrade the facades so Market Street looks and feels much more welcoming and much more vibrant than it did 5 years ago. So I want to make sure we take the lessons we learned from Market Street and apply that across the downtown and across all our business districts throughout the city. I want to make sure that we continue on a good path with housing development. We've been able to do a lot, but there's a lot more to do. One statistic I like to point at is downtown currently has a 99% occupancy rate for the housing downtown. And what that means is that it's very difficult for anyone to find a place if they want to come down. It means we've built a successful product that people like. And we need to expand on that. And we need to expand on that by doing more mixed use, mixed income development in the Hamilton Canal District, in the downtown, and everything that connects to it. I'm really excited to work with the university on the LINK project. There's a lot of work that's going to be happening there, and I think that provides an excellent opportunity for the city to do some things we've never done before, whether that's doing bike infrastructure correctly, which is something the city's never really attempted to do. I think that the LINK area gives us a good kind of spot to create a network, right? Just painting stripes on Father Morissette is not the infrastructure you need to actually encourage people to use it and be able to feel safe when they're using it. If we can build something good in the LINK development and then connect that to North Campus, South Campus, downtown, now you've got a network that people can use and feel safe using it, and then you can really build on that, and you can develop some really good synergies as you work along these projects and really get to a point where you don't have to drive everywhere in the city. And I feel like that's something that people feel like you got to do now. Everyone in Lowell spends a lot of time in their cars, and that means we have a lot more conversations about parking, about traffic. If we can provide the infrastructure so that people don't need to get in their car to drive or to go 2 miles to shop, to go to the doctors, whatever they're doing, and can instead do that on a bike or on foot and feel safe about it, and that's gonna be an additive thing. And transit plays into that too, and the LRT has a whole other discussion, but we can dig into that at some point if you want.
So we will get into all those individual policy areas, but first I think it's important to be able to make a distinction between yourself and the challenger. So how do you view yourself as different from Sean McDonough?
Sure. So important question. Thank you. I've been a part of the neighborhood since, like I said, since I moved downtown in 2009. Long before I ever considered running for office, I've been part of the Lowell Downtown Neighborhood Association. I've spent my time volunteering with various nonprofits that exist in the downtown area. I've really built good relationships with the neighborhood groups, with the administration, and I know how to do the job, right? I've done it for 4 years now. I really feel like that first year of being a counselor was kind of baptism by fire. You don't really get trained on how to be a city councilor. It's just like, congrats, you won the election, good luck, have fun. So it took a little while to figure out exactly how to be effective, how to get through discussions and what to bring where, who to call when something needs to be addressed. And I've done all that work. And I feel like I've been able to be an effective counselor. And there'd be no lag. If I'm fortunate enough to be reelected by the people of District 4, I'm just going to keep on doing what I've been doing. I really enjoy doing the work, and I just want to have the opportunity to continue doing it. And I think it's important to keep people or to elect people who really are plugged into the neighborhood and have been for a while. Not saying that Sean isn't that, but I think he's younger. He has a young family. That takes a lot of time, obviously. I don't think anyone really appreciates how much time it takes to be a city councilor until you're a city councilor. So that's really kind of how I see it. I think that him and I are fairly similar on most policy things. There's not a whole lot of difference there. It's really just the experience and the personality, I think, is our biggest differences.
Yeah, so we'll get into a few, because there are some small policy differences, but
yeah.
I would agree for the most part. It seems like you have pretty similar core values and core views. I, for one, am just kind of excited to see the energy between the two, and just the fact that there is public discourse. I think
yes.
it's really healthy for a city to have. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to have both of you on, was to really hash out a few things. So we'll get to some of those policy disagreements, but first I want to talk about economic development, which was an area you mentioned. We do have a lot of development coming with the link, as you mentioned, the Frontrunner City, which I personally am still looking to understand the specifics of what's coming with that, but I am hopeful about it. I guess my question for you that I've been posing to a lot of the candidates that I've spoken to is, how can we make sure that the economic development that the city is going through is inclusive and beneficial to the people who currently live here?
Absolutely. So one thing specifically of the Frontrunner City initiative is that's really one of the pillars of the Frontrunner City project. It is inclusive, equitable development. So I think it ties in nicely with a lot of what we're trying to already do. I, like you, have plenty of questions about it, and I'm still trying to gain information. I haven't gone on any of the international trips that some of my colleagues have to learn more about it, and that's for various reasons. I had a health thing, I had some work stuff going on, but a lot of that information is coming back, and I've really asked the administration to really put a focus on communicating that information to the city. The last meeting where we discussed it, I said, hey, it would be really great if we just had a section on the City of Lowell website that just talked about Frontrunner City, what it is, what it means, what to expect, what projects are we considering as part of this. Just have one spot where people can go to learn about it. I feel like that's a gap right now, and I want to make sure that information gets out there. Sorry, other?
Yeah, just different approaches we might take to make it this development inclusive. What are some of the core ways we can make sure that it benefits people here?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, first thing is information, making sure people are aware of it. And the second is really outreach and participation. The city has gotten, I feel, a lot better about including those voices. We saw it as part of the development of the city's master plan, the part of the development of the housing production plan, which unfortunately my colleagues didn't support in passing on the council floor, but we'll get back to that. A lot of those things, we've done a lot of partnerships and a lot of outreach with the various communities within Lowell, because Lowell is not a monolithic community in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of different pockets of folks that we need to make sure we're engaging, and that's where it all starts for me. I want to make sure that we do as much outreach and inclusion in these discussions so that we don't get to the finish line and then somebody says, hey, why didn't we do X, right? Everybody in Lowell brings their own things to the conversation, and I think there's a lot of value to be had by including those voices and making sure that people do feel included. And when we do things like grant programs or new developments, it's really important to look at people who are already here doing the work, right? Like if we're gonna be building out new retail space or something, let's work with some of the small businesses that are already here that might be looking to grow, right? We don't need to go recruit, we don't need to solely recruit businesses from outside Lowell. We got a lot of people doing a lot of good things in the city, and just make sure they're at the table, make sure they're aware of what we're doing, and Lowell's a city of partnerships, and the more partnerships we can build and include in these programs, I think the better off we all are.
Yeah, I know you were at a recent small business, not sure exactly what to call it, but like meeting with the 6 Foot Jesus campaign.
Yes.
I saw you there for that, and I do appreciate collaborating with local small businesses that are already here. The other thing I'm wondering about is in the education realm.
Mm-hmm.
So Mara Healy has made a promise that they're going to expand universal preschool in gateway cities. So I'm assuming Lowell will be one of those. I'm interested in, how can we leverage preschool as a way to make sure that young people are educated and ready to take on some of these new jobs. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think Lowell is kind of uniquely positioned for that. There aren't a whole lot of cities of our size, about 115,000 people that I know of, where you can go from pre-K to a PhD without leaving the borders of the city, right? It's pretty amazing what you can accomplish in the education realm within the city of Lowell. We see a lot of initiatives around that with the UN Global Leaders or Learners, Global Learning, I can't remember the exact name, and that's a testament to what we can do in the city. Something like universal pre-K would be fantastic. Being able to expand our early childhood offerings is huge. When I attended the recent State of the Schools presentation on Thursday, given by the superintendent, Liam Skinner, and one of the things he talked about was the early childhood opportunities within the city. There's currently around 600 and some odd seats available for early childhood programs within the city. And according to his calculations and the school department's calculations, we need that number to really be like 14 or 1,500. So there's a lot of growth there. There's a lot of opportunity there to do a lot of good. I'm excited to see what the state's program is really going to look like and how we can leverage that. And because we have a lot of discussions about the state of our school buildings, for example, and the work that's needed there. If we're going to be talking about almost another 1,000 kids, we're going to have to figure out what that looks like from a facilities point of view. So that's going to be an interesting discussion, and we're going to have to figure out how to solve for that. So I'd like to see us really get on that sooner rather than later, so we're prepared and not behind the eight ball. But I think that that's an important step.
Continuing on education as a way to develop inclusive prosperity, this spring during budget season, there was kind of a bombshell where current city manager Tom Golden had proposed a $4 million cut in direct cash to Lowell Public Schools. And I've kind of mentioned this in a few of my other interviews. The council was able to encourage Manager Golden to decrease the cut to, it was like a $2 million cut, I believe. What do you think we should be doing moving forward regarding city funding for public schools?
Sure. So I think it's important to note that the best thing we can do is to have a strong working relationship between the superintendent's office and the city manager's office, right? My biggest frustration with this whole situation was how it felt like you said, a last minute kind of thing of the school department wasn't expecting this change and it became a whole thing. I've encouraged the city manager to really work hand in glove with Mr. Skinner and the school department so that we can go through the entire process of developing a budget and not making any assumptions, not having any surprises at the last minute. That communication is key because the school department is trying to develop their budget before this, in this case, before the city had developed their budget, right? So they were thinking, not unreasonably, that the amount of cash support they would get would be the same. obviously the city has all kinds of pressures on the budget, and what's available for us to do with our funding. 70% of the city's budget comes from state and federal funding. Only 30%-ish comes from our property tax levy, right? So we as a city are extremely dependent on what the state can do and what the state does do for us with their budget. So it kind of put us a little behind the eight ball there. One thing the state has done that has helped was the funding of the Student Opportunities Act. The Student Opportunity Act was passed so that gateway cities like Lowell would have access to more direct funding from the state through Chapter 70. That funding flows directly to the schools, and that's fantastic. There is a local component that is required as part of that, and the numbers changed obviously, but going forward, we need to all be on the same page here and figure out how we're going to do it, and what assumptions go into creating the budget. The city can't find millions of dollars at the last minute in a budget that takes months to prepare. So that's really where it comes down to for me, and I think continued advocacy for our schools at the state level is an important thing that we need to continue to maintain. Things like the Fair Share Amendment that was passed, a big chunk of that funding is supposed to go to education. So that's something we can lean on to help give our schools the cash they need. Additionally, there is this agreement called Maintenance of Effort, which talks about the non-cash contributions that the city makes to the school department, whether that's maintaining a building or all the other things that go into it. DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is extremely prescriptive about what can go into this agreement. And so most of that agreement is really just what the state says it is, right? And we're really talking about, I think it's like a 10% chunk of that non-cash contributions and how that moves towards the maintenance of effort line item. We meet net school spending every year. That was something we struggled with for a while. That is the mandated minimum amount to spend on the school system per state law. That was something that other gateway cities have struggled with. Lawrence, for example, their school system was taken over for a while by the state because they weren't meeting that school spending in part. So we've been able to do that, but education is extremely important, and I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be able to empower our children to be successful. There's a lot that goes into it, but
yeah.
Sorry for being rambling.
No, it's great. You mentioned the Student Opportunity Act. I know there's a bill in the State House right now to make sure that Chapter 70 funding keeps pace with inflation.
Yep.
Because there's kind of a bug in the Chapter 70 formula that it doesn't have to do that. Would you support, trying to encourage our state legislators to support that bill?
It sounds like a good idea. I would definitely want to do some more research to understand, exactly what it's trying to do. But on the surface, it definitely sounds like a good idea. We see costs go up all over the place, and unfortunately, we have a lot of things that don't keep up. And so that sounds like it's probably one of them. I'd like to have a conversation with our state reps to understand what that does, its likelihood of passing and being implemented, and hopefully that's something we can support and continue to fund our schools properly.
Moving on to housing.
Housing. Okay.
So a large part of most people's budgets is
Yes.
how much they spend on their housing. And I'll say the cost of housing has far outpaced the average wage in Lowell in recent years. So
Yes.
in your view, what are the problems with Lowell's housing market, and what should we do about it?
Sure. So I think the problem is that, or one of the problems is that it's not Lowell's housing market, right? It's a regional issue for us. The region, if you want to zoom out and say New England, or at least Metro Boston, or however you want to look at it, has really been underinvested in developing housing for 30 to 40 years at this point. So we've put ourselves in quite the hole to dig out of. The only way that we're ever going to make a difference is to be able to do more large-scale housing production than what we're doing now. For the past 2 years, I've been representing the city council on NEMCOG, which is the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, which is basically Lowell and the surrounding 8 towns. With what NEMCOG does is helps all of the member communities with planning, housing production plans, etc. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago was the NEMCOG annual meeting. I attended. One of the people who came and presented and talked to us was the deputy director of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which is a mouthful, by the way, from the state. And she came and she was talking about housing production across the state. Back in the 80s, Massachusetts was producing 20 to 30,000 housing units a year. For the past few years, it's been 6,000 a year. Overall population has grown. So if we have more people and we're building less housing, that's only going to create more competition and increase the cost, and that's exactly what we've seen. I mentioned earlier that our downtown has a 99% occupancy rate. Really what you want to target is a 5 or 6% vacancy rate. When you have that, you have the flexibility in the housing market for landlords to actually have to compete on price, right? Because people have an opportunity to move to somewhere else that they might get a better deal. If 99% of your housing is full, it's very difficult for anyone to do that, so the prices just go up. We've seen other cities across the country, Austin being one of them, that have managed to produce a ton of housing. And when they've produced a ton of housing, surprise, surprise, they've seen the actual rent price fall. It's very simple supply and demand. It's economics 101. We need to build more housing. Lowell can't build enough housing on our own to be able to reverse the trend across the state and the region. The state recently adopted the housing fund, I can't remember the name of the act, that did things like legalizing ADUs across the state, etc. That's a step in the right direction. We need more of that. But locally, we need to do what we can do, and we've had success with changing some of the zoning things that I talked about earlier. We've had some significant developments at all tiers of housing, both market rate, affordable, workforce, as well as deeply affordable housing. We've been able to see some good success with those projects locally. I want to see us continue to do that and look for opportunities to improve our zoning, streamline our permitting, and make it easier for people to build housing. One of the things that we as a city are kind of stuck with is there are less developers now who build housing than there were back when we were building 20 to 30,000 housing units a year. What that means is developers now have choices about where they do their projects. The cost of building housing here in Lowell versus building the same exact building in Boston, for instance, the only difference is the cost of the land, right? The land's going to cost you more in Boston than it would in Lowell, but your rent or what you can sell the units for is going to be way more in Boston than it is in Lowell. So if I'm a developer and I have a choice of where to build housing, it's probably going to be in Boston where I can make more money doing it. So that's just a reality that we're kind of stuck with and have to compete with. And we can get help with that by encouraging the state to really pass more laws that give, whether it's more incentives or whatever, to developers to build housing in gateway cities and other underserved areas. I think that's an opportunity we need to seriously look at, and hopefully we can move the needle on that because it will help.
You were one of the biggest supporters of the housing production plan. In the discussion about it, you were probably the most vocal supporter of it.
If you look at the housing stock across the city, it's getting older. It's not getting younger. And we can put up a closed sign and not have anyone else move into Lowell if that's what we want to do. That's not what I want to do. Moving to Lowell was an opportunity for me. It's been an opportunity for many of the residents of this city. I'm not willing to close the door because we don't want to build any more housing. I think it's important that we move forward with this, because with no housing production plan, what are we doing?
Why did you support the plan, and do you think if we had changes in the council, would you bring it back?
It's got to come back. Whether we have the same 11 members or I guess we'll have at least one change due to one person not making it through the preliminary election, but it's got to come back. It's something that NEMCOG, who I mentioned earlier, spent a lot of time and effort working on, and it's something that the other 8 communities in NEMCOG have all adopted one. Most cities and towns in eastern Massachusetts have adopted one. Do we need to adjust it? Sure, I'm open to that conversation. We can talk about any edits we want, but the lack of having one approved and adopted by the city means that we get less points in grant award systems at the state level. We're shutting ourselves out of opportunities by not having it, and it's got to come back. There's no other option in my mind. I think NEMCOG did a great job of helping to develop that. I think that we possibly could have had some more education from my colleagues in the community before it came to a vote. That might have helped. So that might be something we can look to do next term. I think that people read it and had some understandably emotional reactions to some of the content in it. Change is hard. Change is difficult. There were things in that plan that people don't want to see in their neighborhoods. Some of it, okay, maybe we can have a discussion about, the wording or how things work, or, or figure out maybe we need to do certain things in one part of the city and certain things in another part of the city. But we just need more community engagement, and we got to get to the point where we can bring something that does pass back to the floor.
One of the areas that I think were controversial was the idea of changing zoning.
Yes.
To allow more multifamily housing. In your mind, to what extent should we be changing zoning to make it similar to what you said about downtown, like more efficient to build and less costly to build?
So I think one of the main concerns that you hear about any kind of zoning change is people are worried about maintaining the character of their neighborhood. And I understand that. People move to a certain place because they like the way the streets are laid out, because they like how things look and feel. They like the quiet that you can find in some of our single family neighborhoods, things like that. But when you look at our zoning code and you look at our existing built environment, something like 70% of our housing stock doesn't currently conform with our current zoning code, which tells me that the zoning code is not necessarily maintaining the character of the neighborhood. It's just preventing anything from getting done. And it's preventing people from building a house that would fit in a neighborhood, whether it's a single family or a duplex or a 3-family home, because of the existing requirements in the zoning code. We've tried to make some changes around the zoning code by doing things like overlay districts in the downtown, the MBTA Communities Act, things like that. But we have not been successful at a kind of zoom out and rethink of the entire zoning code. And I think it's really time for that. I think that there would be a lot to be gained by developing a zoning code that lets people build things that fit into the neighborhoods, and we can do some upzoning to allow denser developments in places where it would make sense. It doesn't have to be in every area of the city, but I do think that there are a lot of areas that could benefit from that.
So here I want to go to another part of housing, kind of responding to some feedback that I got on a recent video.
Sure.
Which is that it's kind of funny to me because I felt that maybe in my content I had focused too much on the issue of homelessness and was trying not to like overdo it. But then some folks, said they really wanted me to talk about it. So,
okay.
How do you, think about the issue of homelessness in Lowell, and what should we be doing about it?
Sure. I think once again, this is an issue that is not purely a Lowell issue. It's a regional issue. It's something that cities are of our size, cities smaller than us, and certainly cities larger than us are all currently struggling with. We as a society have been very good, or have gotten very good at removing people from housing for various reasons. And it's very difficult to get people back into housing. I had a conversation recently with Karen Frederick, who used to be the executive director at CTI, and she's been working in this area. She recently retired, but she'd been working in this area for decades. And one of the things she said to me was, when we were working on this 30 years ago, we had places to put people. There were more opportunities to get people off the street and into a rooming house, a shared living situation, whatever. A lot of those places are gone now. So it's a much higher bar to get people the assistance that they need. And if you look at the Lowell Transitional Living Center on Middlesex Street, for example, they have the dorms for people who are, just need a warm place to sleep. And then they also have some studio apartments above. There are folks who have been living in those studio apartments for 2, 5, some cases 10 years, which means that they haven't been able to move on to the next step of housing. So that hasn't opened up that apartment for somebody in the dorm to move into, which hasn't opened the dorm bed for somebody who's on the street. When we have discussions on the city council floor, and we've talked to the city's health director, I've asked, what is what's really the top challenge of being able to house people and get them the help they need? And she said it's the lack of affordable housing. We just don't have enough housing stock to be able to get people the help that they need. We have been able to have some successes recently with some new shelter beds and new targeted facilities that have either opened or are opening. 555 Merrimack Street is one. There's some new veterans housing that's come online recently. CTI is working on developing a 30-bed women's shelter on the corner of Warren Street and Church. So these opportunities and housing situations are coming online, but just not enough and not fast enough. We got to figure out how to provide that housing. And it's not just housing, right? We need to figure out how to provide permanent supportive housing, because a lot of people who are struggling don't just need a home. They need the assistance to keep them in that home, whether that's job training, whether it's help with addiction, whether it's help with mental health. There's all these unmet needs in our community, and we need to figure out a way to start meeting those needs more efficiently. That's been a challenge, and it's something that CTI and the other organizations that do work in this area are attempting to solve, but there's just not enough money, there's not enough beds, there's not enough people doing this work.
So appreciate you bringing up permanent supportive housing, because that's an issue. One of the downstream solutions that I see is that, once a person is unhoused and they're struggling either just, maintaining a job or with mental health or addiction, it can be a great way to get people into housing. It also can reduce the need for emergency medical transit, etc. And I've seen it to be like a proven model.
Yes, studies have shown that overall it saves you money to do this.
Yeah.
So we just got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. My understanding is that there's a need for more funding at the state and federal levels.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And the next thing I wanted to mention, just since you brought it up, is the need for deeply affordable housing as kind of a preventative measure before people become unhoused, because, as you said, it's so hard to get people housed again once they are unhoused. I was looking at the housing production plan.
Yep.
And I saw in there that it said that the largest housing need is at the most affordable level. There's currently a 3,000 unit mismatch between people who can afford a $300 monthly rent and available units. So it sounds like that's an area we could work on.
Yes, I agree. And like I said, I don't think that Lowell is going to be able to solve this on our own. We're going to need help from the state. We're going to need help from our surrounding communities, because the only way to get through this and to improve it is together, in my mind. And that's why I'm happy to be the city's representative on NEMCOG, and trying to move that needle there. The folks who work at NEMCOG have been doing a lot of this work and a lot of helping communities try to plan and try to do so in an inclusive way. And there's always more work to be done.
Let's talk public transit.
Sure.
So, put broadly, what are some areas for improvement in Lowell's public transit system, and what do you think we should be doing about it?
Sure. So, I think when people hear Lowell's public transit system, the first thing they think of is the LRTA. But really, for me, that's most of it, but not all of the public transit system. Also, in my role with NEMCOG works closely with LRTA. There was a fantastic presentation done by a fellow resident of District 4. His name is Blake Acton. He works for NEMCOG as a regional transit planner. He did some amazing analysis using census data, figuring out where people live, where they work, and how accessible their jobs are via the LRTA, and how that compares to other regional transit authorities across the state. I can send you the link on YouTube if you haven't seen the presentation. It's really worth your time. I would like to have Blake come in and present that same knowledge and data to the transit subcommittee of the city council, because I think there's a lot to be gained here. But really, one of the things that stuck out to me was the comparison of ridership and utilization of the LRTA compared with MEVA in Lawrence, BAT in Brockton, and a couple other systems, and how it compared from before the pandemic to now. There have been significant improvements, and those numbers have come way up for the other systems. LRTA, not so much. There's still some work to be done there.
LRTA is sort of behind on service levels, ridership, productivity, and commute times, with some hopeful increases that we've saw in 2024. Hopefully more to come. And sort of our recommendations is to consider increasing frequency along some of our highest ridership routes that also show the greatest potential improvement in jobs access, which Route 7 and 15 are sort of the big standouts.
I think that getting LRTA's frequency up would go a long way towards encouraging more people to use the system. I think it's very difficult right now to take the bus to work or an appointment, because if you miss a bus and the next bus doesn't come for 35, 40 minutes, it's not a viable option a lot of times. So if we can work with LRTA to get the frequency up and also get the service hours up. Not having service on Sundays is a challenge for folks. Not having service after 7 o'clock is a challenge for folks. So I think that's two things that could be done. The problem is that LRTA is operated by it's really a state entity, right? It's the city doesn't have a whole lot of control over what LRTA does from a day-to-day basis. The board that runs LRTA is made up of a representative from one of each of the member communities, which means Lowell has just as much voice in it as Raquette does, as Acton does. So that makes it difficult for the city to advocate for change. The LRTA does do a good job at being a partner with the city. Communication is good, but we got to figure out how to move the needle and help them be more effective. I think one of the things that they've started to do, which I'm excited about, and I think is providing some improvements, is their partnership with the university. When you think of UMass Lowell, you think of a school. You don't think of a transit company, but they run buses all over the city to get people from their various campuses and their various dorms and everything to where they need to go. LRTA has started running one of the one of the UMass Lowell routes, I can't remember which one it is, in the morning, which includes a connection at the Gallagher terminal. So people can take the train to Gallagher, get off, get onto a bus, and come right to North Campus. That has always been a challenge because the LRTA buses were the only buses that were picking up and dropping off at the train station. So if you're trying to get to the university, you would have had to take a bus from the train station somewhere else and then change to a university bus to get where you're going. And that makes people not want to do it. And that makes it much more difficult for people to feel like it's a reliable way for them to get where they need to be. So strengthening those connections is important. I continue to have discussions about our infrastructure and what we can do to prioritize the buses. We spent a ton of money to get rid of the Lord Overpass and put in bus lanes. I've recently seen a couple buses in the bus lanes, and I get excited when I see that, but it doesn't happen near enough. We got to figure out how to make things like that more effective for LRTA, to be able to improve their service, to make ride time shorter, which can help increase frequency. If it takes a bus 40 minutes to run a route, you can only that one bus is only going to show up every 40 minutes. If you can make that bus take 30 minutes, you improve the experience for everyone riding the bus, but you also provide additional service for people to be able to take advantage of it. So things like that, we got to continue to look for opportunities for improvement. And I've always been kind of a transit nerd. When I was growing up, my grandfather, I spent a lot of time with him. He was a streetcar operator back in the day for Eastern Mass Street Railway, and then later a bus driver. So I spent a lot of time with him up at Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine. There's a streetcar from New Orleans actually that is owned by Seashore now, that was actually in Lowell for quite a while, 966, the green New Orleans car. And I've actually ridden that car both in Maine and here in Lowell, which I think is kind of fun. I also have wedding pictures from it, which is another fun thing. But I always have been fascinated by transit systems, how they work, how to improve them. So it's something that I really enjoy getting in the nitty gritty on and having those conversations to figure out what we can do to improve it. So.
Yeah, speaking of the nitty gritty, so you and Councilor Scott, and then you seconded a motion to request that the city manager work with the LRTA to increase frequency on the most used routes. That was back in May.
Yep.
I understand there was a response in September, I believe. And I'm wondering, so I was looking at the data from 2020, which is admittedly a couple years old, but the LRTA Comprehensive Transit Plan in 2020, and they were saying that their highest ridership routes were Route 7, 5, and then like behind that were 14 and 18. Are those some of the areas you think could be increased in frequency?
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire system could do with increased frequency. But it's a question of resources, right? You only have so many buses, you only have so many drivers, and you only have so much funding to be able to meet the need. They have increased frequency. They've been able to, during the pandemic, they had some significant challenges, as many operators did, and they combined a lot of routes. And the combination of the routes really hurt ridership. They've been able to separate those routes again. They're all running independently, which is helping. They have been able to make some improvements. They've gotten some new vehicles recently. If you've seen them, the new red buses.
Oh yeah.
So there's a couple different kinds of those new buses. Some of them you'll notice have a hump on the top. Those are hybrid buses. But some of the routes that LRTA goes on has some lower bridges. That hump makes those buses too tall to be able to negotiate some of those bridges. So they also had to buy just regular plain old diesel buses that can actually fit under the bridges. And so they've made improvements. They're making progress. They're continually looking to to address those needs, but a lot of it is a funding problem. They had a driver shortage for a while. They've gotten past that. They've been able to get basically fully staffed up at this point, which has been very helpful for them being able to meet these requests. But there's always more to do. So,
last question on transit.
Sure.
I wrote a piece recently, a Substack, about bus stops, and I have actually spoke with some folks at NIMCOG about bus stops because they did a whole
inventory.
Thank you. Yes, they did an inventory of all the bus stops in the city, looking at 824 active bus stops. And one of the things that I think about when I'm trying to use public transit is, like, if it's winter, if it's raining, snowing, am I going to be able to stand out there very long?
Yep. And
the inventory found that out of the 824 active bus stops, only 51 of them have any kind of shelter. It's about 6% of them. I mean, I'm sure that you can't have, it's not very sustainable to have a shelter at every single bus stop, but, and I understand that these bus stops themselves are maintained by the city, I believe. So do you think we should be expanding those to make sure that it's more comfortable to use the bus?
I think there's plenty of opportunity for improvement here. I think the first thing we should do before we're looking to build any shelters at any of the existing bus stops is to understand whether or not all the bus stops are in the right place. One of the reasons that I say that is, if you think about Dutton Street, the intersection of Dutton and Market, there's a bus stop for several of the LRTA routes, principally the downtown shuttle. It's in the intersection it's right at the intersection, but it's through the light. So what happens is the bus pulls up to the light. The light is red, it stops. The light turns green, the bus drives through the intersection and then stops. I don't know that that's the best place for it, right? So I think it would be a mistake to erect a shelter there and say, okay, great, we did something, but have it not be additive to the whole transit experience. So I would like to see us take a look at that with NEMCOG and with LRTA to understand the placement of them all, and then look for opportunities to improve them. Another challenge with that bus stop in particular is what I kind of refer to as the Lowell problem, which is, if you look at a public spot in the city of Lowell, the number of entities that may either own it or have an interest in it, and thus you need to work with them in order to do anything with it, is extremely high. That one spot is both right next to the National Park owned trolley. It's adjacent to Mass DCR Parkland, the Mac Plaza section. That's all Mass DCR. It's not there, but there's other places where it could be the community college or the university, the city itself. So there's a lot of times you look at something and you're like, well, who really owns this? How do we fix this? And so that's something that the city struggles with a lot. DPD has done a good job of trying to inventory all those spaces and really understand who owns and who maintains things. One concrete example of this I always point to is the walkways around town, whether it's the Canal Walk, the River Walk, etc. Each one of those walkways is logged in a Excel sheet that is kept by the Department of Planning and Development that talks about who maintains the walkway itself, who removes the snow, who removes the trash, who takes care of the lighting, etc. We have to keep that because each one of these instances is different, and so it can get very complicated very quickly when you're trying to do something to know who's responsible. So that's a challenge we face.
Next, I wanted to provide some space for you to respond to some things that Sean McDonough said when he was on my show. So he had a few criticisms for you. One of them was that he wished you had been more vocal regarding the presence of ICE in Lowell, especially around the beginning of the new federal administration.
It also bothers me deeply, and I said this months ago on the other show, is can the city do anything? Not a lot, right? Like, and I'm not pretending that, like, you know, but what I think is the bare minimum you should be able to say it's wrong. And I don't need a motion in front of the city council that's like, let's have a big vote on that. I mean, if you are a sitting city councilor and ICE raids the building next door to you, Canal Place 3, which happened a couple months ago, it happened, and somebody left a door open and they got in and they're running through the building, and you can't publicly say that it's wrong. That's really hard for me.
I want to give you space to respond to that.
Sure. Thank you for that. So the first thing I'll say is the presence of ICE in our community is just, it's been extremely disruptive, frightening for people. It's been a huge change from how things used to be, and it's not been a good one for us. I have been a little restrained in my public comments about ICE only because when you are an elected official for a city, when you open your mouth to say anything, you run the risk of that being taken as an official position of the city. We've seen this federal administration be extremely vindictive with communities who have pushed back. And I didn't want to do anything that would have put a bigger target on the residents of our city. I had many conversations behind the scenes with the city administration, with some of our organizations that work with the immigrant community in the city. And I did not feel as though me coming out and saying something would have had a productive result. I didn't want anyone in our community to feel like their family was being ripped apart because of something I said. So I was very cognizant of that. I've done this with other scenarios as well, where people have come to me and say, "Hey, Wayne, why don't we do X?" I said, "Okay, I'm happy to do that, but I want it to be driven by the community that's most affected. I want to have these conversations and understand what that community wants from me as an elected official. I don't want to just come out and say or do something that is going to have negative impacts." And let's be honest, the power of a city councilor to affect national immigration enforcement policy is basically nil. So while it may have felt good for me to come out and say something extremely, aggressive on this, I don't think it would have had a positive effect for anyone who actually lives in the city. That's my biggest concern. If we're in a situation where folks want me to speak up and they want to come to me and say, "Hey, Wayne, I think it would be really great if you said X, and here's why, and here's the members of the community that we've talked to that all believe it," I'm happy to have that conversation. That has not been my experience with this situation.
Focusing on the policy element for a moment, I understand that California has passed a law prohibiting ICE agents from wearing masks. As I understand it, one of the ways in which the presence of ICE is unnerving is that the anonymity and the feeling that
Absolutely.
The people that are here, like, we don't know who they are, we can't identify them. Is that something you think the state of Massachusetts should be considering?
Yes, I do think that is something we should be looking at. As you said, the anonymity is a huge concern. How do you know that when somebody jumps out of a van and grabs somebody, that person isn't just being abducted, right? You can buy a vest that says police off of Amazon and a cheap badge, and you put a mask on and you look official as far as we know. I do have concerns that ICE agents across the country aren't following the laws that we have on the books. I think we should try to get them to do better. I would love to see the state adopt some kind of anti-masking, positive identification, requirements for people doing this kind of enforcement in our cities. I think it would be a step in the right direction. But also, we need a federal administration that actually commits to following the laws we have on the books, and I don't think we have that right now. That's something that is going to make it very difficult for us to make strides in this area.
In closing, I wanted to just give space for you to provide any closing remarks before we close out.
All right. Well, first, Ryan, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me on the podcast. Have a discussion like this. I always value these kind of conversations. Wish we could have done it earlier, but thank you for being patient with my schedule. It's been very hectic, but I'd just like to address anyone out there if you're still trying to figure out who to vote for, you live in District 4, I would like to humbly ask for your support. Being the District 4 City Councilor for the past 4 years has been an extremely rewarding job for me. I've really appreciated the opportunity to get to know so many people and work to make improvements in our neighborhood and in our city to make it a better place to live, to learn, to visit, and to work. And I want to continue doing this work. I hope that you'll consider me when you go to the polls between now and November 4th. I'd really appreciate your vote so that I can continue doing this work and being, a part of this council and trying to improve Lowell to be the best version it can be. So thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Jenness, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.